Everyone called the alien woman ugly, but when I said, "You're beautiful," she froze. The starport of Zyra 9 was alive with a chaos that seemed to pulse like a living organism. Ships of all shapes and sizes docked and took off, their engines humming and thrumming in a constant rhythm. Merchants shouted over one another, hawking strange goods from across the galaxy, glimmering stones, metals that glowed, and fabrics that shifted colors like liquid light. The smell of exotic spices mixed with ozone and the faint tang of alien seaweed from distant oceans. Everywhere, beings of all kinds moved with purpose or aimlessness, their conversations a tangled symphony of languages, some guttural, some musical, some sharp like broken glass. Amid the bustle, a figure moved slowly and deliberately. She drew few eyes at first, lost in the crowd, but there was something about her that caused whispers to ripple through the throng. She was tall, her frame graceful, almost ethereal, yet awkward in the way she moved. Her skin was translucent, with faint veins that shimmered faintly like threads of silver, catching the light. Her eyes glowed softly, pale and luminous, like twin moons in a distant sky, and her hair shifted from violet to blue to green in waves, as if it were alive. But despite the beauty, the murmurs followed her wherever she went, sharp and cruel. "Ugly freak, look at her eyes, what a nightmare." The words stung, though spoken behind hands or under the breath. She tried to ignore it. Her name was Lyra, and she had long learned how to move like a shadow, keeping her head low, hands folded tightly in front of her. She avoided looking at anyone directly, avoiding eye contact, which made her seem even more vulnerable. Each snicker and pointed finger pressed into her chest, a reminder of her exile from her home planet Orath, where rigid rules had deemed her unworthy. Not strong enough, not beautiful enough, not like the others. And now here, in this sprawling port, she was just another alien to be mocked and avoided. Lyra's steps carried her to a narrow walkway between two massive cargo ships, where she hoped the crowd would thin. She could almost taste relief in the air, but her hope was shattered the moment she felt a presence near her. Someone had stopped beside her. He wasn't like the others. He was a human, tall, with brown hair and eyes that seemed calm yet piercing. There was no mockery in his gaze, no amusement, just an attention that made her chest tighten in an unfamiliar way. "I think you dropped something," the human said, crouching to pick up a small stack of metallic containers that had fallen from her satchel. "Here, these are yours," Lyra froze. She had expected laughter, a cruel joke, maybe even a shove. Instead, he handed them to her with a steady hand, eyes kind, unassuming. Her voice caught in her throat, but she managed a soft, almost inaudible, "Thank you." The human smiled briefly, standing straight. "I'm Ethan," he said simply. "Are you new here? I haven't seen you around." She shook her head, unsure of what to say. He didn't press, didn't smile mockingly, didn't let the awkward silence stretch too long. He simply nodded and began to step away. But then, as if drawn by some force she didn't understand, Lyra found herself whispering, I don't know anyone here." Ethan paused and turned back, his expression gentle but curious. "Then maybe we can change that," he said. His words were simple, but they carried an unexpected weight. They weren't heroic or grand, yet they struck her in a way she couldn't name. Lyra looked down at her hands, trying to calm the rapid beat of her heart. She had been alone for so long that even kindness felt like a foreign language. And yet, something about this human, something about the calm in his eyes and the steady way he moved, made her want to believe in more than survival. The crowd shifted around them and a group of aliens passed by, whispering cruelly, their words meant to wound. "She glows like a corpse. Who would want her?" one of them hissed. Lyra felt the familiar tightening in her chest, the shame and fear that had become her constant companions. Ethan noticed the brief flinch, the way her shoulders tensed, and he frowned. "Ignore them," he said firmly. "They don't know what they're talking about." Lyra's eyes widened. Ignore them. She had spent years of her life trying to ignore them, and it never worked. The voices always found her. Yet the conviction in his tone, the ease with which he dismissed their cruelty, made her blink, as if seeing a window to a world she had thought lost to her forever. They walked together for a few steps, Lyra following tentatively as Ethan navigated the crowded streets of Zyra 9 with ease. The human pointed out different stalls, explaining the goods in simple words, laughing softly when a vendor tried to haggle with him over prices. Lyra felt herself relaxing, her muscles loosening, though she could still feel the occasional prickling stare or whispered insult. But here, beside this stranger, she was more than the sum of her flaws in the eyes of the others. They reached a small corner where the port opened onto a quieter stretch of road. Steam rose from vents in the pavement, carrying the scent of ozone and metal. The noise of the crowd was muffled here, leaving a strange, almost serene silence in its place. Ethan stopped and turned to her, giving her a look that was patient, not demanding. "You're safe here for now," he said. "Do you want to sit for a while? You look tired." Lyra hesitated. No one had ever offered her safety without expectation. It was alien, this feeling, this simple act of concern. But the exhaustion in her limbs, the ache in her chest from constant vigilance, made her nod. She followed him to a small bench near the edge of the walkway, her satchel clutched tightly to her chest. As she sat, she tried to calm her thoughts. Why was this human different? Why did he not mock her? Did he see the real her? Lyra's mind flashed to Orath, to the council chambers where she had been judged and dismissed, and to the countless whispers of strangers calling her ugly, unworthy, a mistake. And yet, sitting here beside Ethan, she felt a flicker of something she had not felt in years, the fragile, trembling stirrings of hope. Ethan, meanwhile, watched her with a careful gaze. He did not pry, did not ask for stories she might not be ready to tell. Instead, he simply smiled, a small, steadying gesture, and leaned back on the bench. For a while, neither spoke, allowing the soft hum of the port and the occasional flash of ship lights to fill the silence. Then, as if compelled by a courage she did not fully understand, Lyra looked up. Their eyes met, hers wide, luminous, hesitant. He smiled again, gently. "You're beautiful," he said simply, without fanfare, without expectation. Lyra froze. The words hung in the air, simple and direct, yet they carried a weight that made her chest tighten and her stomach twist. She could not move, could not speak, could not even blink for a moment. No one had ever said such a thing to her, not in years. Not in her exile, not among strangers, not in the scornful eyes of those who judged her. You mean that?" she whispered finally, her voice barely audible, fragile as a thread. "I do," Ethan replied, unwavering. "I see you. Not what they say, not what they mock, not what the council decided. I see you." The world seemed to tilt slightly, as if the usual noise, the usual cruelty, had faded into a distant hum. Lyra's mind raced, but for the first time in a long time the racing heart in her chest was not fueled by fear. It was fueled by wonder. For several long moments she simply stared at him, frozen, unsure of what to feel, unsure of what to say. Her lips parted, then closed again. Her glowing eyes seemed to brighten slightly, reflecting the strange warmth that had begun to seep into her heart. Finally, she whispered, I don't know what to say." "Then don't," Ethan said gently. "Just know that someone sees you." The crowd beyond the walkway continued its cacophony, the whispers still floating through the air like tiny, sharp arrows. But here, on this small bench in the quiet corner of the bustling port, those voices did not reach her. Here, for the first time in years, Lyra felt a sense of possibility. She was not defined by their mockery. She was not just the alien they called ugly. She was more than that. Ethan stood, giving her a reassuring nod. "I'll be around," he said. "If you need someone, I'll be here." Then, without another word, he slipped back into the crowd, leaving her to absorb the weight of his words. Lyra remained seated long after he left, staring at the horizon where ships rose and fell, where stars peeked through the faint smog of the port. She could not stop thinking about the simple phrase, "You're beautiful." How could it carry so much meaning? How could a few words shift something so deeply embedded in her heart? Hours passed, though she did not move. She watched the port, studied the beings around her, and for the first time allowed herself a small, cautious hope. Maybe, just maybe, things could be different. Maybe she could find a place where she was not mocked, where she was not alone. As night fell over Zyra 9, the lights of the port flickered and danced, casting shadows across the walls and walkways. Lyra rose from the bench, her limbs stiff but her spirit lighter than it had been in years. She walked slowly back into the crowd, keeping her head held higher, her glowing eyes bright and alert. She did not yet know what lay ahead, nor did she know if she could fully trust her feelings. But the seed of something new had been planted, something fragile, delicate, yet undeniable. And somewhere in the crowded port, a human named Ethan moved through the chaos, unaware of the small miracle he had helped create, a human who simply saw, and in seeing, changed a life forever. The next day dawned over Zyra 9 with a sky streaked in colors no human world could match: violet clouds, pale green sunlight, and drifting motes that shimmered like tiny stars. The port was alive as usual, but there was a strange calm in the air, as though the city itself had sensed something new, something shifting. Lyra walked carefully among the crowds, her steps hesitant but deliberate. Her mind still replayed Ethan's words from the day before: "You're beautiful." Every whisper, every cruel joke, every mocking glance that had haunted her for years seemed to lose some of its weight. Yet fear lingered, a shadow she could not shake completely. As she moved through the bustling streets, she tried to avoid attention. She tucked her hair carefully, lowered her head, and gripped her satchel tight. But even with her caution, the whispers followed her like persistent echoes. "Ugly freak! What a mistake!" They came from merchants leaning from their stalls, from groups of teenagers with jagged eyes, from strangers who had nothing better to do. Lyra's stomach tightened at each word, but she pressed on. She had learned long ago that running would not protect her. Only careful movement, invisibility in plain sight, could help her survive. Yet there was a new awareness now. Every time someone sneered, every time a laugh brushed against her ears, she remembered the human who had seen past it. Ethan. She remembered his calm eyes, the way he had handed her back her scattered containers, the simple words that had changed something deep inside her. She did not yet understand how one small act could mean so much, but it had. And the strange thing was, she wanted to see him again, not out of fear, not out of hope for protection, but because she wanted to know if such kindness could exist beyond that one moment. The port seemed endless, a twisting maze of cargo containers, walkways, and neon signs. Lyra moved toward a quieter street where traders sold smaller goods, hand-carved metal trinkets, glowing fruit from distant planets, fabrics that shifted in color as they caught the light. Here there were fewer people and fewer eyes trained on her. Yet even in this small haven, a group of aliens noticed her. They were 3 in number, taller and stronger than most, their bodies covered in dark, iridescent scales. Their eyes glinted with amusement and their whispers cut through the air like knives. "You again," one hissed. "Still trying to hide, still thinking you belong." Lyra stiffened but kept moving, pretending not to hear. She had no desire for confrontation, no wish to be noticed beyond necessity. She had learned long ago that attention brought danger, ridicule, and pain. But the aliens were not satisfied. They stepped closer, blocking her path. One of them, the tallest, leaned forward, his glowing eyes narrowing. "Do you think anyone here will ever like you? No one wants you. No one will ever see you as beautiful." The words landed with a sting, sharper than any physical blow. Lyra's chest tightened, her pulse racing. She wanted to retreat, to vanish, to disappear completely. Yet as she opened her mouth to say nothing, a calm voice cut through the chaos. "Hey!" The 3 aliens turned sharply to see Ethan striding toward them. He was unarmed, carrying only a small satchel, yet his presence seemed to command attention. His eyes were firm, unwavering, focused on the 3 bullets. "Step back," he said, his voice steady. "She isn't yours to mock." The tallest alien snorted, amused. "And you think you can stop us, human? She's weak, and you are just a human." Ethan smiled faintly, but there was no fear in his expression. "Maybe, but weakness doesn't give you the right to hurt someone else." He took a step closer, his tone calm but undeniable. "Now leave her alone." For a moment the alien seemed unsure. The human's confidence was different, unlike the usual fear or submission that most beings showed. Then, with a sharp laugh, they exchanged glances and slowly backed away. "This isn't over," the tallest one hissed, before melting back into the crowd. Lyra's legs shook as she stared at Ethan. He looked at her and nodded briefly, as if to say, "Are you okay?" She wanted to speak, to say something, but no words came. Instead, she simply nodded, a small, almost imperceptible motion. "You don't have to face them alone," Ethan said, his tone soft now. "Not here, not anywhere." Lyra's eyes met his, and for the first time in many years she allowed herself to believe it. She had always been alone, always had to protect herself. But maybe there was someone willing to see her as more than what others said. They walked together through the port, Ethan pointing out small, interesting things along the way. A vendor selling glowing berries, a young alien musician whose fingers danced across a strange instrument, creating harmonies that seemed impossible. Lyra's attention slowly shifted from the fear she carried to the simple joys around her. It was strange, this feeling of ease, this ability to notice beauty in the world when the world itself had often made her feel invisible. As they passed through a quieter alley, Lyra finally found her voice. Why are you helping me?" she asked, her voice hesitant. Ethan paused, looking down at her. "Because no one should be made to feel worthless for being who they are," he said simply. "I don't care what others say, I see you." The words hit her harder than any insult had before. Seeing her, truly seeing her, was something she had long forgotten she deserved. She felt a flutter of warmth in her chest, something unfamiliar and confusing. It was not fear, not exactly, but a strange new hope. They reached a small square where alien children played, chasing light orbs that hovered in midair. Lyra watched them, her luminous eyes reflecting the dancing lights. She felt a pang of longing and sadness. She had never had a childhood like this, never felt safe enough to play, never felt a place where she belonged. Ethan noticed her gaze and smiled. "You can belong somewhere," he said gently. "It might take time, but it's possible." Lyra hesitated. She wanted to believe him, but the voice of the past, the taunts, the laughter, the council's condemnation, was still in her mind. I don't know," she whispered. "I've been alone too long. No one has ever said I'm good enough." Ethan knelt slightly, bringing his eyes level with hers. "Good enough," he repeated softly. "You've been judging yourself by the wrong standards. Those who hurt you are not the measure of your worth. You are more than they can see, more than anyone can see at first glance. You just need to let someone help you see it for yourself." Lyra's hands trembled as she listened. No one had ever spoken to her like this. She had been trained to hide, to retreat, to protect herself from the world's cruelty. And yet Ethan's words felt like a bridge she had longed to cross, but never believed existed. The port grew darker as the twin moons rose, casting silver light over the crowd. Merchants began to pack up, and travelers hurried to their ships. The crowds thinned, leaving a quieter atmosphere. Lyra felt a mix of relief and anxiety. She had survived the day, but tomorrow could be worse. The aliens who mocked her might return. She could not predict what dangers lurked. Ethan noticed her tension. "Come on," he said. "I know a place where it's quieter. You can rest for a bit." He led her to a small rooftop garden above one of the quieter buildings. Plants from distant planets grew here, glowing faintly in the moonlight. A small fountain trickled, creating a soothing rhythm. Lyra hesitated at the entrance, unused to such beauty and tranquility. "It's okay," Ethan said softly. "Sit, take a moment, you deserve it." Lyra sat carefully on the edge of the fountain, her glowing eyes reflecting the soft light. She wanted to speak, but her throat felt tight. Ethan sat beside her, leaving a respectful distance. Neither spoke for several minutes, letting the quietness wrap around them. Finally, Lyra whispered, "Do humans always see people this way?" Ethan shook his head. "No, many humans can be cruel or indifferent, but some we try. We try to see people, to understand them, to help where we can. It's not perfect, but it's real." Lyra thought about this. She had spent so much of her life surrounded by judgment, by rules she could never meet, by scorn that cut deeper than any blade. Yet here, now, a human had treated her as though she mattered, not for her strength, her skills, her status, or her beauty, but simply for herself. The realization made her heart ache in a strange, almost painful way. "You really think I'm beautiful?" she asked again, seeking reassurance. Ethan smiled, a gentle, unwavering smile. "Yes, and not just beautiful on the outside. Beautiful in the way you endure, in the way you survive, in the way you move through the world even when it tries to crush you. That kind of beauty, it's rare." Lyra felt her chest tighten, and tears threatened to spill. She had never heard words like this directed at her, not in the long years of exile and mockery. She wanted to believe him, but she had been hurt too many times. Yet maybe she could try. The night stretched on. Stars twinkled above Zyra 9, distant and cold, yet somehow comforting. Lyra sat quietly, watching, feeling a strange mixture of fear and hope. She did not yet know what the future held, nor what dangers lay ahead, but she knew one thing with certainty. She was not completely alone anymore. And somewhere deep inside, a small, fragile seed of trust began to grow, a seed that Ethan had planted with nothing more than kindness and a few simple words. For the first time in years, Lyra allowed herself to imagine a world where she could walk freely, unmocked, unafraid. She imagined laughter that was not cruel, conversations that were not tests, and moments where she could simply exist without judgment. The night of Zyra 9 stretched on, and Lyra closed her eyes briefly, letting herself breathe, letting herself hope, letting herself believe that perhaps, just perhaps, the human who had spoken those words truly saw her. And that maybe, in seeing her, he had changed something fundamental about the way she saw herself. The next morning, Zyra 9 was a different kind of chaos. The twin suns rose over the horizon, casting long, colorful shadows across the starport. Lyra walked through the crowded streets with a quiet determination. The night on the rooftop had left her with a strange, lingering warmth, a tiny spark of hope she had never felt before. Yet the fear of mockery still lingered in the back of her mind. She had survived so long on caution, on invisibility, on silence. And now, for the first time, she felt drawn toward someone willing to see her as she truly was. Ethan was waiting near the edge of the market, leaning casually against a metal railing as vendors shouted over one another. When he saw her, he smiled, a warm, steady smile that seemed to calm the chaos around him. "Good morning," he said simply, his voice carrying across the busy spaceport. "Good morning," Lyra replied softly, her voice hesitant. Her luminous eyes darted around, wary of the stares and whispers, but she felt a strange sense of safety near him. Are you here again?" she asked. "I said I'd be around," Ethan replied, shrugging slightly. "I thought you might need some company, or at least someone who isn't going to mock you." His smile was gentle, patient, without any hint of condescension. Lyra felt her chest tighten at the words. It was rare for anyone to offer her company without judgment, without expectation, without mockery. And yet here he was, a human, a stranger in this vast alien world, treating her as if she mattered. For reasons she didn't fully understand, she found herself walking toward him, drawn by the calm assurance he radiated. They moved through the market together. Vendors displayed their strange and beautiful goods, glowing fruits that pulsed with soft light, fabrics that shimmered and shifted color, small devices that hummed with mysterious energy. Lyra observed it all with a sense of wonder, her fear momentarily subdued. She had never allowed herself to notice such things before. Survival had always been her focus, not beauty or curiosity. "You don't usually come here," Ethan said, nodding toward her careful glances at the stalls. "Do you like these things?" They are interesting," Lyra admitted softly. Her glowing eyes followed a small orb that floated above a vendor's table, changing color as it moved. "I have never seen anything like them." Her voice held a rare note of genuine curiosity, not fear. Ethan nodded. "It's good to notice things," he said. "The world has a lot more to offer than what others tell you to see. You just have to look." His words felt simple, but they carried a weight she hadn't expected. He was teaching her something far beyond observation. He was teaching her to trust her own perception, to value her own experiences. As they walked, a group of aliens noticed her and began to whisper, their voices sharp and mocking. "There she is again," one said. "Still thinks she belongs." Another sneered, "Look at her eyes, so strange, so ugly." Lyra felt her chest tighten, her hands clenching around her satchel. She wanted to shrink, to vanish, to escape into the shadows as she always had. But Ethan noticed immediately. He stopped and turned to face the group, his posture firm. "Enough," he said, his voice carrying authority despite its calm tone. "She is not yours to judge. Leave her alone." The aliens laughed at first, thinking it a challenge, but Ethan's unwavering gaze and steady presence made them hesitate. "You humans are always so bold," one of them said finally, backing away. "This isn't over." And with that, they melted back into the crowd. Lyra felt a strange mix of relief and awe. She had never seen anyone stand up for her so calmly and effectively. It was not force or violence. It was the simple courage to defend, the simple belief that she mattered. She looked at Ethan, her luminous eyes wide. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice almost lost in the market's noise. "You don't have to thank me," he said gently. "Just let me help if I can." His tone suggested patience, understanding, and a willingness to be there without demanding anything in return. They continued walking, moving toward a quieter part of the port. Lyra felt her steps becoming more confident, though she remained cautious. There was still fear, still the memory of years spent being mocked, exiled, and ignored. But alongside that fear was something new, curiosity, hope, and an unusual trust in this human who had appeared seemingly out of nowhere. As they walked, Lyra felt a sudden hesitation. She had never spoken much about herself. Her past was filled with exile, judgment, and shame. She had hidden her true self to survive, and no one had ever sought to understand her. Yet something in Ethan's calm demeanor, his steady gaze, encouraged her to share, even if only a little. My home," she began slowly, her voice tentative. "I am not from here. I am from Orath, but I was exiled." Her hands trembled slightly as she spoke, as if the act of speaking itself was a risk. "They said I was not beautiful, not worthy, not like the others. I had to leave." Ethan listened silently, his expression gentle. He did not interrupt, he did not judge, and he did not look away. Instead, he nodded, letting her continue without pressing for details she might not be ready to share. "I have survived," she continued, her voice gaining strength. "I have learned to move without being seen, to listen without being noticed, to hide." She paused, swallowing hard. "It is all I have ever known." Ethan's eyes softened. "You don't have to hide anymore," he said gently. "Not with me, and not forever." Lyra looked at him, uncertain. "It is not that simple," she said quietly. "The world, the people, they do not see me as I am. They only see what they want to see. And when they see me, they mock me." Her glowing eyes shimmered faintly with emotion she had long suppressed. "I know," Ethan said softly. "And some of them will continue to do so. But you are not what they say. You are you, and that is enough." Her chest tightened at the words. For years she had defined herself by what others thought, by the rules imposed upon her, by the cruelty she could not escape. And yet here was someone who did not define her by any of that. He saw her. He believed in her, and somehow that simple act of recognition began to lift the weight she had carried for so long. They reached a small plaza with a fountain at its center. The water shimmered in the light of the twin suns, casting reflections that danced across the surrounding buildings. Lyra paused, taking in the beauty. She had rarely noticed such things before. Survival had always demanded her attention elsewhere. But now she allowed herself a moment to breathe, to see, to exist without fear. Ethan watched her quietly, sensing her awe. "It's okay," he said softly. "Take your time. You deserve to notice beauty, even if it is just for yourself." Lyra nodded, feeling an unfamiliar sense of freedom. She sat at the edge of the fountain, her hands resting on the cool stone. For a few minutes they sat in silence, listening to the gentle splashing of water, the distant hum of ships, and the occasional call of merchants closing their stalls. Then Lyra spoke again, her voice tentative. "Ethan, why do you care?" Ethan smiled faintly, shaking his head. "Because no one deserves to be treated like you have, and because seeing someone for who they really are, it's worth caring about." Her glowing eyes widened slightly. She had never been cared for in such a way, not by family, not by the council, not by anyone. And yet here was a human, a stranger, treating her with respect and kindness, without expectation, without judgment. The realization left her feeling both fragile and powerful, as though a new world of possibility had opened before her. Hours passed as they explored the quieter corners of the port. Lyra began to speak more, sharing small details about herself, her past, and her experiences in exile. Ethan listened without interruption, asking gentle questions, offering encouragement, and allowing her to control the pace of the conversation. The more she spoke, the lighter she felt, as if each word released a fragment of the burden she had carried alone for so long. By late afternoon, the sun had begun to dip behind the horizon, casting long shadows across the plaza. Lyra stood, stretching her limbs, feeling a sense of strength she had not felt in years. I should go," she said softly. "There is much to do and I must survive." Ethan nodded, understanding. "Of course," he said, "but remember you are not alone, not anymore, and you don't have to hide." Lyra's chest tightened with gratitude and something deeper, something she could not yet name. She inclined her head, a silent acknowledgement of the bond that had begun to form between them. Then she turned and walked toward the narrower streets, blending into the crowd once more. As she moved through the port, she felt a strange new awareness. The whispers, the mockery, the judgment of others, they still existed, but they no longer had the power to define her. She had been seen, truly seen, by someone who mattered. And that small spark of recognition began to change the way she moved, the way she breathed, the way she existed in a world that had long sought to erase her. For the first time in years, Lyra allowed herself to imagine a future where she might belong, where she might be more than the sum of her exile, her flaws, and the cruelty of others. And as the twin suns set over Zyra 9, casting the port in golden and violet light, she felt a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, the world could be different. The morning light on Zyra 9 brought no comfort for Lyra. The twin suns shone brightly, casting long shadows over the bustling port, yet there was a tension in the air she could feel deep in her chest. Yesterday had been strange, filled with kindness, calm, and a brief sense of safety, but today that fragile peace seemed threatened. Lyra could not shake the feeling that her presence here, her glowing skin and shifting hair, had drawn attention beyond what she had imagined. She moved carefully, keeping to the quieter streets, avoiding crowds whenever possible. Yet her instincts told her that the whispers had grown sharper, more deliberate. She heard them now, even at a distance, like the hiss of a predator. "There she is again," a voice called. "The freak who thinks she belongs." Lyra's chest tightened. She wanted to vanish, to melt into the shadows as she always had. But she also remembered Ethan, the human who had seen her differently, who had told her she was beautiful and worthy of more than ridicule. For the first time, she felt a faint, fragile courage rising within her. Maybe she did not have to hide completely. Her path led her to a narrow alley where she hoped to find some solitude. But before she could step into its quiet, she sensed movement ahead. Figures emerged from the crowd, tall, sharp-eyed aliens, their bodies gleaming with dark scales. Their expressions were cruel, calculating, their eyes glinting as they focused on her. Lyra froze. These were not ordinary mockers. They carried an aura of authority and danger. "You again," one said, his voice cold and deliberate. "We've been looking for you." Lyra's heart raced. She had never faced this level of intent before. The last time she had been hunted, it had been the Council on Orath, enforcing rules she could never meet. Now strangers from a distant place sought her out, and she had no weapons, no allies, only her wits and her instinct to survive. From the shadows, a familiar voice broke the tension. "Step away from her." Ethan emerged, moving with a calm that seemed almost impossible in the face of the threatening figures. He carried no weapon, only a small satchel, yet his presence radiated authority. "You will not harm her," he said, his tone steady and unwavering. The leader of the alien group laughed, a sharp, metallic sound. "And what can you do, human? She is weak. She is alone. You are just—" "I may be human," Ethan interrupted, his voice cold now, edged with quiet steel, "but I am not helpless, and you will not touch her." For a moment the aliens paused, unsure. Ethan's confidence was different from anything they had faced. There was no aggression, no desire for conflict, only a quiet certainty that drew attention. Then, with a sharp gesture, the tallest alien backed off slightly. "This is not over," he hissed. "You will see her again." As the group dispersed, Lyra's knees trembled. She had been terrified, frozen, and yet here was Ethan, protecting her with nothing but courage and presence. She had never seen anyone so brave, so confident in their ability to do what was right without seeking reward or recognition. "You're safe," Ethan said gently, stepping closer. "For now." Lyra's glowing eyes widened. "Safe?" she asked softly, unsure if she could trust the word. "Yes," he said firmly, "but not forever. You need to be ready if they return. You have abilities they don't understand, abilities that make you valuable, and you must know how to protect yourself and maybe even them if necessary." Lyra swallowed hard. Her hands trembled as she considered his words. She had hidden her powers for years, abilities that could manipulate light, bend it to her will, and create illusions so real they could confuse even the keenest mind. She had never used them openly, for fear of exploitation. Yet now the need to survive, to protect herself, was undeniable. Ethan extended a hand. "Let me help you. I can't fight for you forever, but I can teach you, guide you, and stand with you. You don't have to face this alone." Lyra hesitated. Trust had been a stranger in her life. Exile had taught her to rely on no one, to hide every aspect of herself. But something in Ethan's calm demeanor, his unwavering confidence, made her pause and consider. Slowly, cautiously, she placed her hand in his. I don't know if I can," she whispered. "You can," he said simply. "I believe in you, and that's all the start you need." They began walking toward a secluded section of the port, where crates and cargo containers created a maze-like network of narrow streets. It was quiet here, and the air smelled of salt and metal. Lyra felt the faint hum of her powers beneath her skin, the familiar tingling she had learned to suppress. She had never allowed anyone to see it, but with Ethan there was a strange sense of safety. "Show me," he said softly, "just a little. I won't be afraid, and I won't tell anyone else. I want you to trust me with this." Her glowing eyes flickered nervously. Manipulating light had always been risky. In the wrong hands or the wrong eyes, it could be used against her. But Ethan's steady gaze gave her courage. Slowly, hesitantly, she extended her hands, focusing on a small patch of light near a nearby wall. The light responded, bending and shimmering like liquid, forming shapes that twisted and danced in the air. Lyra's lips parted in surprise. She had not allowed herself to practice in months, fearing discovery. Yet here, in the quiet alley with Ethan watching without judgment, the light flowed freely. "That's incredible," Ethan said, his voice full of awe. "You can control it so naturally, and it's beautiful." Lyra's heart skipped. For years she had been taught that her powers were dangerous, that they made her a target, that they were something to hide. And yet, here was someone seeing them as a gift, as an expression of who she was. I never thought someone would see it that way," she whispered. "You're more than you know," Ethan said firmly. "And the world doesn't always know what it's missing, but we can change that, step by step." The day continued with small exercises. Lyra practiced controlling the light in subtle ways, Ethan offering guidance and encouragement. Each success, each small demonstration of her skill, built her confidence. She began to feel something she had not felt in years, a sense of agency, a sense that she could protect herself and perhaps even influence the world around her. But as the twin suns climbed higher, Lyra's joy was tempered by awareness. The aliens who had threatened her were still out there, and she had no idea what they intended. The port was vast, full of eyes, and her visibility made her vulnerable. She had survived through hiding and silence, and now she had to survive while being seen. Ethan noticed her concern. "You're worried about them," he said, "and you should be, but hiding won't help forever. You have power, skill, and intelligence. You can use them to protect yourself, and I will be here to help you." Lyra nodded, feeling a sense of determination rising within her. She would not be a victim. She would not be defined by the cruel words of others or the fear that had dominated her life. She had power, she had guidance, and for the first time she believed she could make a difference. As the day turned to evening, the port began to settle into a quieter rhythm. Ships docked and departed, merchants closed their stalls, and travelers hurried to their vessels. Yet even as the bustle faded, Lyra remained alert. Her senses were sharpened, her mind racing with possibilities. She knew the aliens would return, and when they did, she needed to be ready. Ethan watched her quietly. "You're ready for this," he said. "Not just because of what you can do, but because of who you are. Courage isn't about never being afraid. It's about acting despite the fear. And you have it." Lyra felt her chest tighten. His words were more than encouragement. They were a challenge, a promise, and a recognition of something she had long denied in herself. She allowed herself to believe, even a little, that she could rise to the occasion. Night fell over Zyra 9, the twin moons casting silver light over the port. Lyra and Ethan moved toward a small rooftop where they could observe the area. She watched the shadows, the movement of people, and the faint glimmers of energy in the distance. Every sound, every flicker of light, every whisper of motion was noted, cataloged, and analyzed in her mind. She was learning to prepare, to anticipate, to survive in a way she had never dared before. "You're doing well," Ethan said quietly. "Better than you think. And tomorrow we continue. We'll get stronger and they'll have to learn something new about you." Lyra nodded. Her glowing eyes reflected the moonlight, shimmering with determination. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of purpose beyond mere survival. She had someone who believed in her, and she had abilities she could use to protect herself. The cruel whispers, the mocking glances, they would no longer control her. And somewhere deep inside, a seed of confidence, nurtured by kindness and courage, began to grow into something stronger. Lyra was no longer merely surviving. She was preparing, learning, and for the first time, daring to hope. The night air over Zyra 9 was cool, carrying the faint smell of salt and distant engines. Lyra perched on the rooftop edge, her glowing eyes reflecting the silver light of the twin moons. She had spent the day training with Ethan, practicing control of her light-bending abilities, learning to anticipate threats, and preparing herself for whatever might come. The memory of the alien group that had sought her earlier still lingered, but it no longer had the power to paralyze her. Fear was still present, yes, but now it was tempered by knowledge, skill, and the steady presence of someone who believed in her. Ethan joined her silently, sitting a careful distance away. "They'll come back," he said softly. "You know it." Lyra nodded. "I know, I'm ready for them this time." Her voice was quiet but firm, the timbre of determination coloring her words. Ethan smiled faintly. "Good. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting even when you feel it. And you've learned that well." The first sign of trouble came from the shadows of the port below. A subtle movement, barely noticeable, as the alien group began to converge on her position. This time, however, Lyra did not freeze. Her training, her awareness, and her confidence in Ethan's support allowed her to react with precision. She focused, summoning the light around her hands and feet, creating faint shimmering patterns that bent reality slightly. The first alien approached with a sneer, his claws extended. But as he stepped into the area illuminated by her power, his expression shifted from confidence to confusion. The light danced around him, reflecting in impossible angles, creating illusions that made him hesitate. His movement faltered. Ethan moved beside her, observing carefully. "Good," he whispered. "Keep it controlled. Don't let fear dictate your actions." Lyra concentrated, her hands tracing arcs in the air. The light swirled, bending to her will. The aliens were caught off guard, their steps faltering as they tried to adjust to the illusion she created. Shadows multiplied, shapes shifted, and even the tallest alien, the one who had led the others before, hesitated, unsure of what was real and what was her power. "You're stronger than I thought," he hissed finally, regaining some control. "We'll see how long that lasts." Ethan stepped forward, raising his hand slightly. "You underestimate her. You underestimate humanity, and that is your mistake." The leader's eyes narrowed. "Humans, weak, fragile, yet always bold," he muttered, stepping closer. "And you stand by her. You will regret this." Ethan's calm remained unbroken. "Not today," he said firmly, "and not ever while I can stop you." The confrontation escalated as more of the alien group approached. Lyra's mind raced, but for the first time she was not paralyzed by fear. Her training, her understanding of her powers, and Ethan's presence gave her focus. She allowed herself to see the patterns, to anticipate movements, to use her light bending in precise, controlled ways. Illusions twisted the air, creating false images, disorienting the aliens, buying her precious moments. One of the aliens lunged forward, claws extended, aiming directly for Lyra. In response, she raised her hands, creating a blinding flash that forced the attacker to recoil. The light bent around her, forming barriers that confused and blocked. Another tried to sneak behind her, but Ethan's steady hand guided her movements. Together, they were a team, human courage and alien ability blending into an effective defense. "You're learning fast," Ethan said quietly as they moved in tandem. "Keep your focus. They'll adapt if you hesitate." Lyra's mind was sharp, her senses heightened. She no longer felt fear as an immobilizing force. It was a tool, a signal, a guide, a reminder that she needed to stay alert. She wove her powers with precision, creating illusions that made her seem to vanish, then reappear elsewhere, confounding the aliens. Each movement, each flash of light made them second-guess their attacks, slowing their advance. The tallest alien, frustrated and enraged, roared. "Enough!" He stepped forward, attempting to strike directly. But Lyra, anticipating the move, shifted the light, bending his perception. For a moment he saw multiple versions of her, unable to determine which was real. In that moment of confusion, Ethan intercepted, stepping between Lyra and the attacker, forcing him back with presence alone. "You cannot win this way," Ethan said. "You cannot control someone who knows their own strength." The leader growled, fury evident in every movement, but the alien group began to falter. Their confidence, once assured, was shaken. They were used to victims, to fear, to control. Lyra, however, was neither victim nor weak. She was learning to wield her abilities, to defend herself, and to act with intention rather than reaction. Realizing the confrontation was turning against them, the aliens finally retreated, melting into the shadows of the port. Lyra exhaled, the tension in her body releasing slowly. She felt a strange exhilaration, mixed with lingering anxiety. The threat had passed for now, but she knew it would not be the last. Ethan stood beside her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You did well," he said softly. "More than well. You controlled your power, stayed calm, and faced them. That is courage." Lyra's glowing eyes reflected a mixture of relief and pride. For years, she had never imagined herself capable of standing against threats without fleeing. And yet here she was, victorious, her powers manifesting with precision and skill she had never allowed herself to trust. "Thank you," she whispered, voice trembling slightly. I never thought I could do this." Ethan shook his head gently. "You didn't believe in yourself because no one had shown you it was possible, but now you know, and you can keep learning, keep growing." They spent the rest of the night discussing tactics, control, and preparation. Lyra practiced weaving illusions, bending light to create barriers, and learning subtle movements that made her appear almost untouchable. Ethan observed, offering guidance but never taking control. He wanted her to realize that her strength came from within, not from reliance on him. As dawn approached, Zyra-9 twin suns rose again, painting the sky in soft hues of violet and gold. Lyra felt a sense of accomplishment and anticipation. The threat had been real and she had faced it. She was not helpless. She was not weak. She had courage, skill, and someone who believed in her. Ethan looked at her, his expression gentle. "Today was only the beginning. Tomorrow you'll be stronger. And one day you'll face challenges without me at all, and you'll still succeed." Lyra nodded, feeling the weight of his words settle within her. She had spent her life surviving. Now she was beginning to live, to grow, to act with intention rather than fear. As they walked back through the waking port, Lyra noticed the world with new eyes. The colors were brighter, the sounds clearer, the possibilities endless. She realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act in spite of it. And with Ethan by her side, she was learning how to stand tall, how to face the world, and how to be seen, not as an outcast, not as a freak, but as someone who mattered. In the following days, Lyra's confidence grew. She explored parts of Zyra-9 she had never dared enter, interacted with beings she had previously avoided, and practiced her powers in increasingly complex ways. Each success, each small victory, reinforced her belief in herself. The world was still dangerous, still filled with those who would mock or harm her, but she no longer faced it as a trembling outcast. She faced it as someone learning to harness her strength and courage. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the port, Lyra and Ethan stood atop a high balcony overlooking the city. The stars above shimmered like distant diamonds, reflecting the potential and wonder of the galaxy. Lyra felt a calm resolve settle within her. She had faced fear, confronted threats, and discovered the depth of her own abilities. And in that journey she had found something far more valuable: trust, connection, and the affirmation that she was indeed beautiful, not just in appearance but in resilience, courage, and spirit. Ethan smiled, sensing the change within her. "You're ready," he said softly. "Whatever comes next, you'll handle it." Lyra nodded, her eyes shining with confidence. I think I am," she said. "Thanks to you, I finally see it for myself." And in the quiet glow of Zyra-9 twin moons, the alien woman who had once been mocked and cast aside stood tall, a beacon of courage and self-belief. She was no longer defined by the cruel words of others, nor by fear. She had faced the world, mastered her gifts, and discovered her own beauty and strength. The city hummed below, alive with possibility, as Lyra and Ethan watched together. The future was uncertain, yes, but it no longer frightened her. She had learned the greatest lesson of all. True strength came from within, from courage, and from the belief that one could rise above the judgment of others. And with that knowledge, the alien woman who had once been alone could face the universe with unshakable confidence, ready to embrace all that lay ahead.